Hello, everybody. My name is Sharon Dittmar, and I'm a congregational life consultant with the Mid-America region of the UUA. And you are here for a webinar with the amazing Jan Gartner, who's going to talk about staffing at our UU congregations in the time of COVID-19. And Jan is the Compensation and Staffing Practices Manager in the Offices of Church Staff Finance. We also want to share with you that this webinar is made possible by your generosity. It is your gifts to the annual program fund given every year that enable us to bring you this quality programming. So thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jan, who has some slides to share, and we've got some questions to go through.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be with you today. And Sharon, are you seeing my slide?
I am indeed.
Terrific. Well, it's good to be with you. And I understand there's a part 2 next week with my colleague, Rob. So I'm really pleased to be part of this 2-part series. The mission of the Office of Church Staff Finances is this: guided by our values, by the values of our faith, we equip congregations for excellence as employers and their staff for financial competence and well-being. So most of you are probably on the helping your congregation be a good employer part of the equation, but if you're a staff member, then we are also here for you to help you with your own well-being. So thank you again for being here, everybody. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say a couple completely non-viral things because we did have work before the virus hit, so I thought I'd take the opportunity. And we'll talk about your congregations as employers and provide some guidance from the UUA and some resources. And I will include in the guidance also, because I know people are interested, a little overview of some of the federal programs that are in place now to help congregations. So here's the part that doesn't have much to do with virus at all. You may have seen that we've made a shift. For many, many years, you've been hearing about compensation guidelines, and we have now shifted our language to compensation standards. And those standards include the salary and benefit recommendations that we've always provided, but there's also a new segment to these, which is legal requirements. Because what we found was congregations were very much wanted to abide by our guidelines to meet our recommendations for salary and benefit levels. And sometimes that actually meant that they paid less attention to things that are actually the law. And that didn't feel right to us. So we thought we need to point people back at the direction of what they need to do, what the legal requirements are around payroll and benefit plan rules. So we have some nifty new checklists on those things, and we hope to help you orient to the legal pieces as well as our recommendations. We are revisiting our salary recommendations methodology this year. It's been quite a while since we had kind of large conversations about how we come up with our salary recommendations and what form they should take. And later on, we'll also be revisiting benefit recommendations. The other thing, just as a reminder, we have a couple of model employment agreements for ministers, and these are posted on the transitions pages of the UUA website, ministerial transitions. So right now we have full-time senior or solo settled minister posted, as well as full-time interim. And we've been asked about some of the other ones, and so these take a little while to take the kind of the standard full-time settled and adapt it for different situations. But we do plan on having more templates available. So second minister, part-time minister, non-clergy employment agreements. So we hope those will follow soon. And we have just about ready for posting. Also a model for terminating a ministry. So we just want you to be aware that some of those additional resources are on their way. So congregations as employers during COVID-19, I mean, my job is always to help congregations be great employers. And so many things are different right now. So I wanted, everything I'm saying really is kind of applicable anytime, but it seems to take on greater significance right now. So starting with your values, who do you want to be as a UU congregation? How are you living out your values? I usually say within your walls, but I'll say within your staff. How are you showing kindness and compassion? What does interdependence look like right now among your staff, among your leaders, maybe with other congregations? Equity, what does it mean to be fair and equitable to your staff? Recognizing the need for creativity. Things are going to happen differently. Maybe some things won't happen at all. That's part of a creative conversation. What can we let go of during this time? And how do we make room for doing things differently and doing things new? And resilience. How do we keep up our strength and our fortitude and all take care of ourselves and ensure that our staff remain as healthy and strong as possible in these pretty tough days. In terms of paying staff, this follows our very initial recommendations that we put online very soon after the virus started impacting some of the communities. And that said, keep paying for now. And I'm gonna go into a little more detail about what that really means. But please try to keep everyone on their regular hours. And so you're going to have people who can do their jobs. Maybe they're doing a job from home that they usually do from your church building, but overall, it's pretty much the same thing that they've been doing. Some staff might be taking on somewhat different roles. You see this other duties as assigned. That's something we all joke about in job descriptions. But actually that could be a real thing right now, and being sensitive to people who are taking on different roles. If you have people working extra, people working not as much, there are all different kinds of things that might be happening. And our main message is that we want to see people's wages maintained for the time being. Now, what does this mean for your non-exempt staff? So there's something called the Fair Labor Standards Act, and I can do a whole webinar on that, and I'm not going to right now. But the Fair Labor Standards Act says that people get overtime pay when they work more than 40 hours in a week. It says that they must receive a minimum wage, and it says that their employer has to have records of their daily and weekly hours worked. So those things hold for non-exempt staff. They are not exempted from those rules. Minimum wage, overtime, record keeping. Your exempt staff are people who fit certain criteria that mean that they are exempt from those rules, or the employer, the congregation, is exempt from having to follow those rules for certain staff. So let's talk about non-exempt staff for a minute, just to be clear. They might be unable to do their job because their job requires them to show up in the congregation, and they can't do that thing right now. And so what does it mean to keep paying them? There's some federal programs that may help with this, but we want you to keep them on the payroll if you possibly can, and find an appropriate code for them. It could be administrative leave. There could be something that you call it that just designates that they're still on paid time, okay? And
so Jan, I actually have a question about this. This is Sharon again, everybody. This is a question I do get from people. And the question is like, they're like looking at their budget, they're scared as congregational leaders, and they're like, well, the child care worker doesn't come in, the custodian's not keeping the building, we should just cut them now. Mm-hmm. But you're suggesting something different. Can you say a little bit more about why?
Yeah, well, we don't want to make assumptions about any of our staff. And I know there are congregations that say, well, you know, the child care worker, it's only a few hours a week and they have another job. And that could be true. It may be that you're very aware of particular situations, but the default is that this is income that they're accustomed to getting. And we want them to be able to, in the short term at least, to know that they can rely on that income coming in. And some of these people that we know they have other jobs, right now they might not have that other job either. So this is just a time to take care of people as best you are able, whether they're 40 hours or 4 hours. So yeah, for the non-exempt staff, you do need to have a record of their quote hours worked. And if you're paying them for hours that they didn't actually work, then you would record that in some fashion, okay? Some kind of leave, that they're paid leave. Now your exempt staff, it's a little different because they get their salary, the same salary, they're all salaried. And you don't have to have a record of their hours. So this ends up being more of a negotiation with the supervisor and what's fair. If they're putting in extra time, by law, you don't have to pay them for it, but you might ask them to keep rough track of when they're putting in some extra hours. You could offer them some offset time later. There are ways of just being reasonable if people are putting in extra time. If they're putting in their regular time or less time than usual, you would just pay them. And again, you could record certain days as administrative leave, paid leave, in order to keep not only their wages, but if they're on benefits, make sure that they continue to get all of their benefits. So it's supposed to look like they're working. And if they're working extra, be sure that you're paying attention to that. So flexibility, really important. And I can tell you as someone who regularly works from my home, you know, I have a certain style and a certain rhythm, and I know when I do my best work, and I tend to be, you know, take breaks during the day. And it might take people a little while to find their rhythm when they're first getting used to working from home, if that's not typical for them. So please do allow for flexibility. Some people have family that they're taking care of, kids at home, just new household needs and rhythms. So do find out what people need to do their best work, and I'll say more about that. Briefly about unemployment insurance. In most states, either religious workers, people who work for religious organizations are not eligible for unemployment. It's a state program, so each state gets to do it its own way. Normally, people are not eligible for unemployment, okay? There's one state, Oregon, I believe, where it's required. And there are a few states, a handful of states, where employers can opt in. So in theory, the church could be paying into their state unemployment program, but we find that most of them don't. So under ordinary circumstances, most of your staff are not going to be eligible for unemployment if they lose their job or are underemployed. There is a federal program that I'll talk about briefly that can help them in that situation because it will be eligible. They will be eligible. Most importantly, please involve staff in conversations about their responsibilities and their pay. If you're a supervisor, you know, have direct conversations, stay in contact about what's being discussed in general terms. If you know there's some tough budget things going on, you know, find a way to keep staff somewhat in the loop because it's pretty anxiety producing for staff to feel like there are conversations going on that relate to their work or to their livelihood that they aren't privy to in any way. So we really want to make sure that as an employer, you're doing the best you can to be forthright with your staff in these hard times. Now, you probably have personnel policies, and there may be some staff, your minister for sure and other staff who have their own employment agreements. And we want to make sure that you know what's in those. So those are the agreements that you already have with your staff that have to do with sick time and medical leave, and if they are, if they're let go under particular circumstances, do they get separation pay? So be aware of what you've already committed to through your policies and your agreements. And you have to do at least as well as you say, but you could do better, okay? Just like I said, I mean, you can provide paid leave that you haven't explicitly written into your personnel policies. So don't think you're bound by them in terms of being generous to your staff, because I know that's a confusing point, that you need to do as well as your policies, but you can go beyond your policies. Okay, yep, talked a little bit about working from home, recognizing the need for flexibility and how helping people work things out if they have family and other things to attend to. And I know some people were having trouble with having to use, they have one cell phone, and now a whole bunch of people in the congregation want to have their phone number. And please help your staff keep good boundaries. Somebody said to me today, I can walk away from my computer and my email, but I find it really hard to walk away from my phone or not to pick it up if it rings, and I might not be sure if it's someone from church or somebody else. And so let them set some boundaries on their time in whatever way feels reasonable. And there might be a couple of people that have their phone number, but please don't make your staff feel like now that they're, if it's your administrator who would usually be answering the church phone, that now the whole church gets their phone number. We're still kind of working. We talked about, there are options like Google Voice where you can kind of turn it on and turn it off as a forwarding number and things like that. But just keep in mind that your staff don't want to be on 24/7, and give them some flexibility and help them maintain some good boundaries. Supervision and teams. Your staff are leaders and modelers and tone setters for your congregation. So if people see that they're doing okay and they're being taken care of and are taking good care of you as a congregation, that helps manage everybody's anxiety in this time. We have a lot of resources on supervision and teams. I know my own staff team at the UUA, we're actually meeting more than we ever did because we have to, because now everybody's in a different place. So we've had to say, we're going to talk twice a week. The whole team's going to get together and we're going to talk about what we're doing. And we actually weren't doing that before. And so some people have naturally come up with new strategies to be especially communicative with their teams. And some people are feeling kind of lost. They're used to those daily interactions and informal conversations that happen when you're right in the next room from somebody, and haven't quite figured out how to keep all of those connections going. So whatever your role is, if you feel like you might be in a position to just offer some support or help make sure that staff are feeling like that there's a there for them with their supervisor and their team, that would be awesome. We had some situations early on where staff were feeling pressured to come into the church past the point where they felt safe doing so. We want to make sure that all of our congregations are making strong statements about attending to people's safety. I'm hearing that there occasionally are congregations where one person is working in the office, whether it's the minister or the administrator. They know that they have that safe space where they can go in. But then what happens if other people have keys and they show up and they just came to pick up things and they stop in the office and that kind of thing? So make some rules, work with the staff, make some rules about under what circumstances people might come in the building, right? Just make sure everybody's clear about what can happen during this time.
Dan, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I
Oh,
was
good.
speaking with a clergy person who said their building is large enough that when their staff come in, they are, they're like 100 feet from each other. They're nowhere near each other.
Yep,
But
yep.
the members who had keys would come by like, well, now I'm going to do deep cleaning. And they're like, we don't want you all in the, like, we have, our papers are here and we really need, please don't deep clean now. Just don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone has a slightly different situation, but if you just know that, that safety and boundaries and taking care of people, your staff and your members is really important. And so you might need to have some conversations like who are the people that can come to the building, and do they need to let somebody know ahead? And that might look a little bit different everywhere. Yeah. We've had some situations of staff who feel that they're being left out of key decisions that impact their area. And so just to be attentive to, sometimes there's a decision made about, online worship or something, but it actually connects to what the religious educator is doing, or the membership, or the administrator. So it's good to have your team's voices at the table as best you can. And that, again, with supervisors, making sure that the staff feel that they have a supervisor who's supporting them in this unusual time. And so I don't know what all your roles are, those of you who are watching this, but if you feel like you can help ensure that there's strong systems for the team and supervisory conversations to be happening, that would be awesome. Because sometimes staff don't know to ask for it, and maybe a board president just checking in and saying, is everyone getting what they need? How are the team conversations going? That could be like really, really helpful to our staff. Yeah. All right. I am going to fly through these federal programs. We have on our federal policies and actions webpage, we have a similar looking slide set to this, but when you get to these federal laws, they're super, super detailed, and we have other resources posted. So this is just to kind of let you know briefly what's in them, okay?
And Jan, just because people always ask me about the resources, I just want to let people know I am keeping track of when Jan is referencing something on their webpage. I will find the link, and the resource list will come out with this webinar at the same time.
Yay. All right. And I do have a slide with kind of the 3 major links for people to look at too. So it'll be.
And I appreciate at the top right, you do have the Families First fact sheet, and you always indicate where it is. So if folks make sure you look to the right top of the slide. There's often a link to show you where to find this on the UUA webpage before I get that information to you.
Yeah. So Families First is the one that employees are really paying the most attention to. There's actually a poster that the Department of Labor put out. That's the Families First employee rights poster. And so, how you have those mandatory workplace posters posted somewhere prominent in your church. This would be one of them if the staff were working at church. Right now, with people not working at church, we're suggesting that you send like email everyone that poster. So that's kind of giving them their notice of their rights under the Families First Act. All right. And we have a link to the poster on our federal policies and actions webpage in the Families First section. And basically this provides some paid sick leave and an expansion to family and medical leave. Now, many of you have heard of the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, and it doesn't apply to very many congregations because it only applies to organizations with at least 50 employees. But this expansion actually does apply to congregations. So both this paid sick leave and the family medical leave your congregations would be participating in this. And there are tax credits, all right? You can get money back on your payroll tax. And if it's above and beyond your payroll tax, they'll actually send you money. So this is something that allows you to provide time off, sick and family leave time to staff at very little cost to you, all right? So you're gonna wanna read some detail on that and make sure you know under what situations you can actually use this particular leave, because you wanna use that first. You wanna have a separate category for it above and beyond what your congregation already was providing. So if somebody gets sick and they're entitled to this particular leave because they're in quarantine, they're isolated, they're symptomatic, okay? You want to use this leave. You want to code it with this leave because then you can get a credit for that, all right? You can get the money back as part of your payroll taxes. So that's all I'm going to say about it, but we do have a lot of information on the website, and we want to make sure that your employees all have gotten the posters so they know what their rights are under Families First. The CARES Act, many details of the CARES Act. You may have heard about the Paycheck Protection Program. We think it's a great thing for congregations to apply for. We're still learning details. Again, we have detailed slides on our federal policies and actions page that go into a lot more than this, but just know that there is a loan program, and that if you use that loan in a certain time period for certain things, it becomes a grant. And it's a pretty low interest loan anyway. So worst case, if you get it, it's a low interest loan. Best case, it's a grant. So that's worth checking out. And we understand that the banks are swamped right now. And so be prepared for some administratively frustrating moments just because this is a program that's popular and under some strain. There's some payroll tax relief and employee retention credits. So there are a variety of ways that the CARES Act is helping employers retain staff. This unemployment insurance is for people not traditionally eligible. And that includes like freelancers, and it includes church workers as best we understand it. So it's good to be aware that there could be some unemployment special relief if somebody does need to become unemployed, all right? Healthcare, there's some new provisions in healthcare. Our health plan, the UUA health plan, was actually a little bit ahead of the game. Private insurance, our insurance was already saying they would cover testing in full. So good to know. We have telehealth is fully covered. There's some really nice things happening, both within the CARES Act and even a little beyond what's required by the CARES Act. Retirement plan provisions. I want to tell you that I believe the UUA Retirement Plan Committee is meeting tomorrow, April 8th, to decide if they are adopting the amendments that would allow these changes. So my understanding is that the changes on this slide need the approval of the individual plan to make them real. So stay tuned. We will have information, but as of this conversation I'm having with Sharon tonight, I can't tell you that all of these things are a done deal. That is up to our retirement plan committee, but there'll be some very nice flexibility and easing of retirement plan rules. And I would expect that perhaps some of those would be made available quite soon. Education assistance, primarily just maybe a reminder to your staff and to you, those of you who have federal student loans, that you can defer and there'll be no interest, there's no penalty for deferring. So that's part of the CARES Act. There's also, we recognize that this could be a little bit of a hard sell for a congregation right now, but usually if an employer wants to contribute to an employee's student debt reduction, it would just be taxable income. I mean, an employee might negotiate, getting some of their loans paid down, but that just it's just like you're giving them extra wages. This provision would allow an employer to give an employee money, especially for student debt reduction, that would not be taxed. So I want you to know it's there. It could be something like if you're getting a new minister, they might want something like that in their agreement. We might have people asking for that. And you've probably heard about the individual taxpayer rebates. So that's my short presentation of the CARES Act. And again, there's way, way more detail on slides posted on our webpage. Shall we talk a little bit about finances and stewardship, Sharon?
Let's do that. But one thing I wanted to lift up was that is a big deal if employees can use their pensions if they feel like they need to without having that 10% tax. If that gets approved, that would be a big benefit. And so this webinar is not only for you as an employer to understand, like, can you apply for CARES Act money through the Small Business Administration, but also like, what should you be communicating with your employees who might not have had time to look through all of this and are also feeling overwhelmed and might not know that their student debt, for example, can go into forbearance or that they could tap into their pension. So just paying attention to this is going to help you communicate with your staff and make them understand that you're really partners in this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks. This is actually, some of our congregations have asked about, should we run our pledge drive now? Or is that kind of like, should we just wait and do it in the fall or something? And we actually had a great conversation with some people in our stewardship and development office about that. And they actually suggested this can be a very, very powerful time to do a pledge drive. People are paying attention. People are hungry for the kind of support and emotional and spiritual gifts that their congregation can give to them during this time. It's a key time to thank your donors for their support, for everybody to be reminded of how much their faith community means to them. So there's no one single right answer, but in general, it also is a way of saying, we got this. We don't know exactly what's coming a month from now or 6 months from now, but we know the congregation is going to be there. And we want to look at how we're going to make our next program year happen in whatever fashion that is. So there's no one way that's right for everyone. And we want to put in a plug for keeping your basic schedule that you had planned on. Now, that said, there is a lot of uncertainty. There's uncertainty about income. Some of you may have rental income that's extremely uncertain. And your individual members may be feeling uncertain about how much they can give. And there's also uncertainty about what the needs are going to be. The programming needs. There are all kinds of uncertainties. So some congregations are crafting two different versions of a budget. And we've said, what if things are kind of normal by September? Or what if they're more like, things are going to be a little different for the fall and then they'll be back to normal in January, whatever the new normal is, right? One guy wrote to me today and said, we have 5 versions of our budget. So good for you. You're welcome to do as many versions. But the idea is to kind of think through at least a couple different possibilities and be able to share those with the congregation. And we do remind you that there could be some savings, right? There could be some travel for your staff, say that doesn't happen over the next few months that you might have budgeted for. There could be, you know, reduced paper, reduced cleaning, you know, there, in addition to some of the income differences, there's also spending differences during this time. So just be sure you're kind of looking through your budget with an eye toward what are some different possibilities in the way this could play out. Endowment funds, reserve funds, every congregation has that money that you never touch because it's for an emergency. And, you know, without getting overly dramatic, this is an emergency. It's okay to touch those things that you only touch in an emergency. This really is a time when you'd say, yeah, this is really unusual. It's an emergency. It's a global emergency. And it's all right to go into those funds. And that said, of course, you know, the market being what it is, you might not want to pull if you think the market is low right now. It's not a great time to pull out more than you really have to. So you need to be a little bit strategic about it. And our common endowment page has some good information and things to think about. But we don't want people to feel like they can't touch it, and noting the downside of withdrawing when the valuation is low. So everyone will have to play with that a little bit differently. Again, just to reinforce in the immediate, you know, be it flexible and generous and understanding, acknowledge, we kind of talked about these things, acknowledging different work and different skills that might be needed. You might even want to have some kind of sort of draft short-term position descriptions just to be sort of clear about what expectations are in this time. That might not feel necessary, or it might feel really important if staff are finding a lack of clarity or having trouble with, you know, how much to work or what's expected. This is a really important time. This is one of those times when, well, we should have been doing it all along, but this is a really good time to do it, which is to make sure you have backup plans in place, right? There might be some key functions in the congregation, and you want to just make sure that there's either cross-training or some kind of plan B, so you don't have like just a single point of failure with this one thing that only one person knows how to do or has the access information for, that kind of thing. So take this opportunity, and it's really something we should all be doing all the time anyway, right? Making sure there isn't just one person who knows how to do the critical thing, right? And again, review your personnel policies, be aware of what you've agreed to, and again, you can go beyond it. So short-term staffing, paying staff through June, it shows care. It avoids having too much disruption as things get ramped back up, as they eventually will. It's hard to return to full functioning when, you know, if you decimated your staff and, you know, people left and all that stuff. So to the best of your ability, if you can retain your staff, that's really great. The federal initiatives will help. There's been some questions about what does it mean to pay staff through June for people with irregular hours? Now, I believe that when you have to figure out average hours for these federal programs, they're saying to you 6 months. We've been thinking 2, maybe 3 months, some reasonable period of time for those staff who work irregularly to figure out what they might, to estimate what they might have been paid on a weekly or bi-weekly basis through June. We'll know.
Jan, just,
yeah.
I have heard the UUA say, if possible, to pay and retain your staff through June, understanding everyone has different circumstances. But my big takeaway was also when people look at budgets and money, they get scared, and maybe they're scared about their job. And when they sit down to be treasurer at their church, they just feel like they need to take out the red pen and cut everything. And before you start cutting everything, know that that's an anxious response. Take a breath, get some more thought partners. What are the consequences of cutting who, when, and when might it be longer to try? When might it be better to ride things out a bit, see what happens, see how your pledges come in, do cash month to month, like just not making a knee-jerk reaction you're going to regret just because you're anxious. And I've even heard people say to me, well, we never liked so-and-so staff member, then now might be the time. And I've said, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Please go
Yeah.
through due process and all necessary things, or you'll regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's exaggerated right now.
Mm.
That were already a little problem, they're probably a bigger problem. And that, I mean, that could be a staff member. It could be a budget strain. You know, there are lots of things that were already a little shaky and now they're really shaky. And yeah, this is not a time for knee-jerk decision making or incredibly emotional decision making. Yeah, I think one other thing, in addition to having different versions of the budget, there's no one saying that you have to do a 12-month budget. So you could say, you know, we're going to put something in place that we think is going to get us from now until whatever it is, October or something like that. And you know, and then we'll make a decision to regroup September and look at the rest of the year. So there are different options. You can be pretty creative and flexible with how you figure out your finances.
And I hear you also saying the UUA is suggesting congregations look at the legal requirements and their policies, but then also consider our values. What do our values call us to do? And to have a sort of robust conversation about that at your leadership level. And whatever you plan on doing to the best of your ability, communicate that to the congregation and the staff so it's not a mystery. And so people are like, they know you thought about it, they know you tried, right? Maybe you're gonna have to let staff go by mid-May if things don't change because of something going on in your congregation. Okay, at least people knew you tried. Or you can say, we're doing everything to make it to June. If you're able to give now through this time, we appreciate it. Because who knows what July will bring, right? So I think communicating to the congregation as well, what you're trying and why you care about things and how hard you're trying to respect the law, the policies of the congregation, and any funding limitations or opportunities you have in your congregation, as well as just our values.
Well said. Thank you. Very good. And so what happens, like, let's say you're one of those congregations that says, all right, yeah, we picked June, we're going to do this through June, and then we're going to figure it out, you know, sometime closer to the end of June. And so it's possible that by then you'll feel comfortable retaining your staff. It could be that you're looking at some staff reductions. That could be temporary salary or let's say this, if you're going to reduce somebody's salary, that should go along with a reduction in hours and responsibilities. All right, it should go without saying. You're not going to just reduce somebody's salary. And some people might say, you know, I'm fine with that. You know, I know even a situation where we had a music director and the congregation knew they were not really paying him fairly. And they all kind of agreed, yeah, this is real, but we can't do any more. The congregation said, this is our budget. And so he said, you know, I'm okay with more time off. I'm okay with fewer Sundays. So they made adjustments to his job scope that made his pay make sense for the job he was doing. So that's a possibility. You know, you might find through conversations with your staff that some people are okay with a reduction that allows them more time or some adjustment in their responsibilities. So that's something to think about. There can be furloughs, which are like temporary layoffs, and there could be layoffs or terminations. And again, you know, do at least as well as you say that you do according to your personnel policies. Do keep in mind that reductions in hours could have implications for benefits. For the UUA insurance plans, they're eligible for people who are scheduled to work at least 750 hours in a year, which is an average of about 15 hours a week. So let's say you have someone who's 20 hours and you're thinking we want to keep them on staff, we need to move them to 10 hours. That's going to eliminate their eligibility for our benefit plans. So just consider that before you bump somebody down below 15 hours a week in particular. The UUA retirement plan, the really, really important thing to remember about that is that once they've started receiving employer contributions, they are always eligible for employer contributions. So, you know, that's what once in, always in means, okay? So if someone's working 20 hours a week and they've met our year of eligibility service criteria and they started getting their employer contributions to their retirement plan, even if they go down to 10 hours a week, they're no longer 1,000 hours a year, but they've already met the threshold. They're already getting employer contributions, and they would continue to, no matter what their hours are, based on their new pay. We get questions about that. Health insurance is really important right now. So if you need to change somebody's employment situation, try to do the best you can to take care of their health insurance in some way. It could be that if they are getting laid off, they're eligible for COBRA. You could offer to pay their COBRA for a certain number of months as part of their separation. This is just a really bad time for someone not to have health insurance. We want to make sure that people aren't left in the lurch, even if their employment is at risk in some way. All right. Life and long-term disability, if you do some kind of, say, short furlough, say it's over the summer and you decide you're going to have staff off over, you know, for the month of August or something, some staff are not going to work. They can keep their life and long-term disability as long as the congregation is paying the premium. That works for a couple of months. And then UUA retirement plan, these are some general reminders about if people make their own contributions from salary, their own elective deferrals, those have to be submitted very swiftly. Employer contributions, there is more leeway. I'm kind of reluctant to say this sometimes because really the best practice is when someone earns a paycheck and some of their money goes to the retirement plan, the best idea is to just get it sent. But we know these are unusual times and administrative things are taking a bit longer sometimes. If you want to hold off and send employer contributions later as a larger chunk, if that's easier, that's an option that you have. But not for their elective deferrals, just for their employer contributions. All right, we've had a number of people ask, because people want as much of their paycheck as they can get right now, if their employer contribution can be redesignated as salary. If people are saying, do I have to get money put in my retirement plan? Can't we just make it so I get the money? And for better or the worse, the answer is no. And you can just imagine over the long haul how tempted people could be not to have their retirement money go to their retirement plan if they had the option of taking it as cash. So it's actually a really good safeguard to say, no, the employer has made a commitment to X%, and that always goes in. But remember, it's possible that people will be able to take loans out without a penalty, to take distributions without a penalty. We should be finding that out very, very soon. As far as the congregation actually changing its commitment, if you're giving 10% right now to your employees and you're thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't be giving 10%. Maybe we want to give 8%. Most congregations do give 10%. But if your congregation wants to change that, that goes by calendar year. So if that's something you're thinking about, that would be for 2021. I hope everyone has heard about the UUA's COVID-19 response fund. That's, if you're able to contribute to that, that's wonderful. And it's possible that your faith community or your staff might be the recipient of of some of those funds if that becomes necessary. Some of the money is going to our disaster relief program. And these are really unusual times. So usually it's, you know, a congregation in a particular town and it got struck by a severe weather event. And, you know, the resources come pouring in for one particular place. And so we're still trying to figure out how are we going to make this work when there are going to be so many areas in need. So they're looking at areas very severely impacted and congregations that are in strong community partnerships to assist people who are at significant risk during this time. The UUA Living Tradition Fund, which is managed by our office, helps church staff who have extraordinary expenses. So this could be something, somebody has needs help paying their rent or a utility bill because of some hardship situation. They might need emergency dental work. Something has come up that's very unusual that they're unprepared for. That's a big hardship for them. Again, we're expecting that to apply to many, many people potentially in the months ahead with various kinds of job losses and illnesses. And we haven't figured out exactly how we're going to decide on the priorities of that, but we want people to know about it. We want people to give to this fund so that we have extra money in order to be able to provide for those most in need. And I believe, Sharon, you probably know this too, at the top of every UUA page, I think right now is a donate to the COVID-19 response.
I think that's true.
Fund. Yeah, so it's easy to do. Here are the three main links. Sharon, were you gonna have the slides also available because they have clickable links? Is that a possibility?
Well, I was going to ask, are you willing to offer these slides up to be shared?
Yeah,
that's lovely.
I'll make a PDF out of them and then.
Oh, everyone's very excited. You can't hear them. They're silently rejoicing.
Yes, clickable links. So here we are, and I want to thank you for coming and being with us. And I have my colleague, my supervisor, Richard Nugent, also on this slide. He is the aid funds person, and if you really want details of Families First and CARES Acts, he's really, really good on the details, much more than I am. So he's a good resource for those, but do check out our web pages. There is a lot there. And I have a question slide. I think I'll take my questions. I'll take my slides down. And Sharon, was there anything else that you wanted to chat about?
Well, Jan, you've answered all my questions. You were amazing. So I just also wanted to mention that sometimes I go to the Church Law and Tax site for information. That's not a UUA site. It applies to all congregations. Know that every once in a while the language will not quite match our values or faith, but they get CPA, lawyer, professionals to discuss issues. And for example, I went to a webinar that still might be free up on their website on the CARES Act. So sometimes you can get good details there too. And I'll include a link to them as well. And Jan, you honestly answered all my questions.
Wow.
I know. I don't have one more.
Well, this is great. Thank you.
Anything else any parting words for us, Jan?
I just take care of people. You know, congregations, Unitarian Universalism, it is about taking care of people. It is about relationship. And we are hearing from staff that they're tired. And I think that's, you know, in anxious times, it's fatiguing. And I think part of that is that there are a lot of new expectations, figuring out how to do the Zoom thing and figuring out how to do the Zoom thing again after your thing was messed up by, you know, intruders. And, you know, I mean, there's just, everything is new all the time. And that's probably going to continue for quite a while. There are going to be new needs and new stresses. So this is a long haul. We don't want people wearing themselves out. So just be conscious of the expectations that are being placed on staff, and we'll take it from there.
I will lift up the UUA as an employer who is trying to model very much everything they're sharing with you. And so we were frankly told at our last staff meeting, Susan Frederick Gray was concerned about the staff and how we're working. And she said, everyone gets to take April 10th off. It's now become a paid day off, which was incredible. And I think the staff felt a lot of love. We got one day paid off, but we understood that the UUA Leadership Council and board understand that we're adapting a lot. And so you could even consider perks like that to your staff, because they are doing a lot. There's clergy trying to figure out how to do laying on of hands and memorial services virtually. There's directors of religious education and RE teachers putting together so much curriculum and stuff. There are choir directors rehearsing people individually on Zoom so they can perform for a portion of worship. And so you might not see your staff doing work, but they're probably still working a lot.
Yeah, that's a great point. Somebody said today they were thinking about doing something in their newsletter to lift up some of the things staff are doing, because they're concerned that members might think, oh, the building's closed, so nobody's working, and that's just largely untrue.
Largely untrue. So I agree with Jan. Take care and be well. Here at the region, Mid-America region, we're here for you. I generally answer our stewardship questions. Not that I have all the answers. I forward you to people when I don't have the answers, or I try and find them for you. But I'm a first point of contact in our region if you'd like to go that way. Dittmar, Dittmar @uua.org. There's, of course, our Stewardship and Development Office at the UUA, and there is the amazing Office of Church Staff Finance, Richard Nugent and Jan Gartner. Thanks so much for being with us this evening. We are so grateful.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right. Bye-bye, y'all.